Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Clouds, Edge to Edge Transformation. I got to know Lisa Gus fairly recently. A lot of it was how she expresses herself, the kind of things she has done. So, Lisa, tell us a little bit about you. How did you become the Lisa that we all know today?
Oh, and here you promised me no difficult questions. I think that I became this Lisa a couple of years ago when I found myself on the steps of World Bank, standing there in a cold wind in November, dressed to the nines and waiting to give a speech on the rights of women and the way that women are being treated across the world, particularly in India. We are talking about a use case for the Supreme Court of India. And I learned right there that my credentials to speak were yanked through no reason of my own, and yanked by a good friend and another good friend whom I actually looked up to, who was actually one of my female role models. And that is when I realized that if I did not speak up, then that would keep happening again and again. So I made a promise to myself at that time on the steps of World Bank that I will never let my voice go silent. And, I think that is the Lisa you're seeing now, the one who's always has something to say.
I'm grateful that you're actually articulating that boldly, and you continue to do that. So, how did you get into different aspects of technology, and what have you been up to lately?
Lately, we have been working on something that we have really started iterating in 2016. And that's what I really want to keep doing until I retire, to be honest, because to us, technology is very intrinsically intertwined with impact. I kind of want to go way, way back to the Manhattan Project when the technology was created without really thinking through the benefits and especially the drawbacks of the technology. And so to me, before you do anything really world changing like AI or blockchain, etc., it's always the why, I think, before the how. And so to me, the why has always been trust, truth, and transparency. And that is really where we have put together the ledger that we were working on since 2016 to bring that to both consumers and to the groups that are working with them, either as vendors or product creators. That is really what WishKnish is about, is removing the intermediaries between the person and the product they're looking to get. And we do so by handling data ethically, transparently, and truthfully.
There was a time when it was believed that technologies are value agnostic. We create the tools, and then it's up to consumers how they use it. What has changed since those times? You mentioned the Manhattan Project. What went wrong when people said a scientist's job is to be values agnostic? And what are the dangers of being value agnostic?
Well, AI, for example, there is so much good that it can bring, but even if things go well and we are not ever forced to confront the Age of Ultron or Terminator scenarios, what it really is going to do is significantly change the way that human labor and, in fact, humans themselves are treated. Data becomes commodity. In fact, it becomes the new economy. What we do is actually assigning and tracking the value that is created through IP, through the sharing technologies, etc. Because unless you do that these days, especially, what you're going to end up with is a way to significantly reduce the rights of consumers to the point where they become a commodity.
It's true. When I hear things like the consumer is a product, somehow I cringe inside and I'm like, oh my God, they have commoditized human beings. So in what ways is your product or is your platform bringing that transparency? Are there any specific things that you do to make it
Yes,
easier?
yeah, so it's a good question. So we are working in 4 areas that I feel that we are the strongest in, and that is the medical sector, real estate, sports and entertainment, and green energy. You would think that this is not anything to do with the blockchain, especially given there has been so much hype around it as a financial vehicle, or a vehicle for collecting properties, etc., as NFTs. To us, it was really all about assigning and tracking the value of data and allowing the data to flow freely across multiple silos to be used as part of the supply chain, as part of CRMs, now as part of the AI training models, and being able to have a very granular control over the reading permissioning, writing permissioning, and especially logging. Few people are concerned with who and when might have looked at the data. And to us, that is as important as the creation of it.
I really like the name WishKnish. Can you tell us how you came up with the name?
Yeah, well, that's actually a funny story. My co-founder and I, and we are actually in DC area. So my co-founder and I are big fans of knish, which you might have tried. It's a Coney Island knish. It's actually an Eastern European pastry that is a mashed potato wrapped in a pastry crust. It's incredibly rich, delicious. You really can have the best type of knish anywhere except in Coney Island. And so one of those days we were sitting there and once in knish in DC, we realized that one thing that would have helped if there was a way to track and create demand before you bring the supply. That would actually significantly increase the ROI for the supplier and potentially make it cheaper for the buyer because there is going to be less waste created for the supplier. And that's how we were thinking of, well, if you wish for something, you create the demand and then you drive in supply, almost like a reverse Kickstarter. And so really the initial iteration of WishKnish as a company has been a marketplace with the reverse Kickstarter mechanisms built in and on a blockchain.
Wish we could get good Knish in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
So now it looks like the blockchain, I mean, as you know, became notorious because of crypto. But there are many use cases, as you're pointing out, where the blockchain, the transparency, the safety is actually much higher and makes perfect sense to use it. And you mentioned several verticals that you're using it. Can you tell us a little bit about why you chose those particular verticals and how the blockchain is helping in bringing about that trust?
Well, I guess, given that we are sort of HIPAA compliant and GDPR compliant out of the box, healthcare was always one use case we really were interested in. And then supply chain e-commerce in general, because that's the initial vision we came up with. But I'm very honest in saying real estate and green energy really have come about because there has been users coming to us and using, and when we realize how our B2B customers were utilizing our technology and how it really fits into those verticals. So it's not that we envisioned, oh, hey, we are going to go into real estate. No, it's more like, oh, look, it actually really works. And that's what we started seeing. It's really the demand that created the supply once again. So I guess we're kind of living our own story.
In terms of AI, as you know, the quality of the data, making it unbiased, doing it ethically is really important. Are there ways in which your technology can be used in non-regulated industries where we still need high quality data, minimal bias, and so on, let's say in HR or in recruitment? Is there a way in which your technology can be used?
Oh, I love that you mentioned that. In fact, there is a client of ours that I'm really excited about that's using it specifically for HR and an ability to improve the quality of HR survey data and waste, fraud, and abuse that's coming out of the medical ecosystem when it comes to employee-fed information. In fact, that is, I think, one of the strong points where you're able to both assign and track the IP that's created, but also validate the person who might be working for a particular industry while fully identifying them for the purposes of broadly decentralized information. So then you can actually maintain the quality of the data received because there is an ability to keep track of the person really working, for example, for a particular industry, but doing so in a way that prevents retaliation. In fact, I told you that the use case in the Indian Supreme Court, that was actually the first application of us in that kind of sector. A young woman, an attorney, was actually sexually assaulted, molested by a Supreme Court judge. When she has complained of what happened to her, guess who was actually assigned to see her to her case? The perpetrator. And in fact, he was also allowed to choose two of his fellow justices who would sit with him. Needless to say, her case was dismissed. Everyone was afraid to step forward because certainly it's unlikely she would have been the first. And that's what we really wanted to do, allow for a transparent and truthful validation of these kinds of behaviors that would serve to build out the infrastructure of a working environment.
In what ways has your life changed once you took this as your goal? As you said, you would want to do it the rest of your life because you feel that this is something that really you have identified with, something that you can make a big difference. In what way has your life changed?
It's actually allowed me to meet some of the good friends in this ecosystem. I think having aligned values is hugely important for that. It allows me to do what I enjoy, and it also allows me to feel like I'm making a difference. I am not a billionaire, but I made myself a promise that if I ever were, I would donate most of it. So feel free to hold me to if such a thing ever occurs. So to me, once my kids, my family have the roof over our heads, food on the table, then the next important thing is actually doing what's important. And to me, that's what we do. Particularly with WishKnish, particularly with distributed ledger technologies, that really makes me feel that I'm doing what I should be doing. It's priceless.
That's wonderful. And as you know, the complexity of what you're doing is quite a bit. I mean, in addition to blockchain, if you're into AI, then you need to get into AI. If you get into any vertical, you have to understand the details of that vertical. How did you learn all these technologies? Did you start learning once you decided you wanted to get into it, or
Oh,
how did you make it happen?
well, first of all, I actually have marketing strategic development background plus healthcare, which I actually learned in college. While I have been occasionally taken for an engineer when I would be speaking to clients, for example, unfortunately, all I can do is place someone on TV, perhaps with any degree of accuracy. However, what I can do is learn, and I really can use, well, I would say cliff notes as provided by my advisors and by my CTO and co-founder to really see which direction we need to go into. But as when you said, how did I learn? Well, when we realized that we wanted to have that WishKnish build on blockchain, and initially it used to be what we do is third-party technologies, but which technologies? So I actually went down the rabbit hole of Reddit at the time. I wanted to know what blockchain was, and that was 2016. Remember the time of the ICOs and all the hype and all. So what I wanted to do is kind of get to really the bottom of it, like what exactly is it and what do you eat it with? So I went to Reddit, and there was a subreddit explained to me like I'm five. Unfortunately, they probably have a far more advanced 5-year-olds than I ever could. But I did actually give me at least a broad overview of the direction I wanted to go into, and off I went, kind of like Alice in a rabbit hole.
That's wonderful. Clearly, blockchain seems to have a lot of applications in the private industry. How about in the government sector?
First of all, I am of the point of view, and I'm probably not in the majority in my industry, is we need more regulation rather than less. And I feel like, at least in the US, the regulation is way behind. And it doesn't just touch on blockchain. I think it's the same with AI and the former now. It's like there has been hope among the innovators, I think, for many years now. Well, first, you do what you do and maybe ask for forgiveness later. When it comes to Uber, for example, and changing the way the employees are being treated, it's important, but it's not life-changing to the fabric of our society. But when we're talking about the way that data underpins everything, like when you talk about AI that is going to significantly change the way the world interacts with you and you interact with the world, I think then we really should look at more regulation, and in fact, global regulation than anything else. And if that means, if not stopping, then at least slowing down the progress, at least until we figure out what we can and cannot do, I'm all for it personally.
In your opinion, are there any risks to people's fundamental rights or to the democratic process in going in an unregulated fashion?
Oh my, yes. I mean, just think about the Cambridge Analytica issues that popped up in the last US election, and in fact, in the UK Brexit elections. And imagine what it's going to do now with generative AI, for example, really taking the world of deep fake by storm. How are we going to know what is each candidate saying? How do we know what to trust? And so how can you make a decision that's right for you and your family if you don't know what you're deciding on at the end of the day? That's where the value of distributed technologies comes in, where you can assign provenance to each statement that is made, that you can really track down to the patient zero before you ever do anything else. And then you actually train the AI on that very granular set of data that is going to make sure that it doesn't hallucinate you out of potentially, say, the union. What if we vote on dissolving the US at one of those days and not really know that we have done it?
It's true. I've been seeing a lot of deep fakes lately, and I worry about that because as the elections get close, it's easy to create fake videos that completely misrepresents different things and different people. Is there a way that can be prohibited or stopped? Because there will always be people who will go beyond regulations. If not in the US, they may do it from some other country, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, but in a way, I think it's kind of like guns. And by the way, I'm 100% for gun control, at least down, except for, say, the hunting rifles. But beyond that, there is no need for us to be having guns, but that's a whole different story. You cannot regulate guns out of existence, but what you can regulate is access to them and help in narrowing down potential suspects if things do occur to minimize the damage. And that was what I'm thinking the regulation can do in the context of global governance.
Do you also see risk to cybersecurity, privacy? We just saw some major leaks. I think Blue Shield, their data is now being sold on the web. So forget about HIPAA compliance. We're talking about complete privacy loss, right?
Oh God, yeah. One thing that we have done with our architecture is made us quantum resistant. Now, I'm not calling ourselves quantum proof because no one can really tell until we actually are confronted with it. But we have been focused on making it future proof, because quantum computers are going to be there before we know it. And in fact, even now with non-quantum stuff, a lot of the SHA algorithms have already been broken down, and some of the quantum algorithms have been broken down before they ever made it through the NIST process. So I feel like it's really a world of attrition. It's going to be the Cold War all over again. So the more robust we make the data silos and the networks that they reside in, the more chance we have in coming out of it, if not stronger, but at least less unscathed. That's why we have been selected for a couple of Air Force SIBRs with the focus on cybersecurity. Given that we are in this arms race, I think there's always going to be something fun to do in this ecosystem, in this space.
It looks like the challenges are going to keep growing because the number of people involved in now creating technology is going to explode. In the old days, it was only a select few who became engineers or computer scientists who had access to it. But now anybody can make a chip, many people can make a system, and anybody can get access to AI and use it in different ways. So, do you think that the problem is exploding in terms of the number of actors that are involved, and therefore any one of them could be a bad actor and could create risks?
Yes, and in fact, I think also there is so much more ways to do damage inadvertently. And that is just given how many tools we have to really damage the system, maybe through fallacious thinking and maybe through malicious one. cybersecurity is something that is going to be paramount to go forward. I was talking to a friend of mine. He's a futurist and working with a number of wealthy families who are looking towards the same. And they feel like within 30 years, there's practically going to be an AI focused data center in every neighborhood. Imagine just how much damage we could do with one of those data centers if it's taken over. How about smart cars? If the fleet is subjugated, then we're going to have the overdrive scenario all over again.
Wow, we're creating almost a monster if you're not careful. So,
Well, Manhattan Project at its best, except everyone's hands on a red button.
so what do you see as the future of work? I don't think we're going to be out of work with all the automation. Looks like there's going to be more work in certain areas, isn't it?
In certain, yes. But my co-founder is a big fan of a book called Mana. He's saying that at the end of the day, all the jobs we don't want are going to be taken over by obviously the robots, the AI, etc., while only the creative pursuits are going to be left for us to do. And it's going to be up to us to really define for ourselves what creative means. Well, he's more of an optimist than I am.
That raises a question. At one time, doing mathematics or even multiplication tables was a big deal, and now calculators can do it. Playing chess, playing Jeopardy, all that is getting automated. Do you think people's view of who they are, their identity will change as all these things get more and more automated, and we have to go look for who am I really?
And what can I bring to the world? I mean, if you look at AI, it can even write stories for you if you give it an prompt. So, what good are you at the end of the day? Yeah, that's something I've been thinking of, and you really put a nail in the head. What do you think, to put it on you? What's your thinking?
Oh, here's the thing that I worry about. Anybody can write using AI. Already we see that on WhatsApp, because what's popularly known as WhatsApp University. People just keep forwarding all kinds of things. That's just passively forwarding, but now they can actively forward, making changes with AI. The question is, who will read? Who will use it? Is it AI talking to another AI, just talking to each other? And what about humans? What will they do? So those kinds of questions pop in my mind, and I don't have any simple answers.
Neither do I. I remember reading a book maybe 30 years ago by Dean Koontz about this town where somehow people's DNA became really malleable. Those who were more seeing themselves as closer to nature, primitive and simple, they eventually became the primordial ooze. And the people who were more focused on technology and progress, well, they ended up fusing into this sort of semi-virtual symbiotic monsters, like have human, have machine. I don't think that any extreme is right. So I'm kind of thinking if we are able to at least retain the core of our values then I think we would be in better shape rather than letting ourselves sort of merge too far in either direction. The genie is already out of the box, right? So we might as well make sure that we can educate ourselves and the genie on what it can do before we let it loose in the world.
A lot of people these days feel disempowered because there's so much technology. It almost looks like there'll be fewer jobs and not much to do. What advice do you have for young people or anybody who wants to get into these kinds of endeavors where human intervention or even human input is absolutely necessary and it can give a sense of purpose?
Hmm. God, if I had such an advice, I would probably give it to my son. My son is actually almost 16 and he's trying to figure out what he wants to do as a career. I think really, if I had an advice, and that's what I tried to tell him yesterday, see what you're passionate about. And not might not be what you want to do for the rest of their life, but at least choose something that you want to do now and give it your all. And if you don't like it, well, fail fast and find something else.
We just survived the pandemic and looks like now we are getting into something more interesting, a
The one
lot
that we are
more.
making ourselves too.
Yes, yes. Well, thanks again, Lisa. You've been amazingly articulate about these issues, and I can see them on the horizon. And it's even more important for us to pay attention. This is the reason I talk to many people and to listeners out there. Yes, we are in a very interesting world. As the Chinese phrase goes, may you live in interesting times. We are living in interesting times, which can be a blessing or a curse. So please come forward, talk about the things that bug you as well as things that inspire you so we can co create a more meaningful world. Thanks again, Lisa.
Thank you.